Hey guys, thanks for checking in on the NFN Radio News Podcast, brought to you by NotFakeNews.biz. I'm Bob Gaddy, editor and publisher of Not Fake News. Some of us thought, at least I did, that when America elected its first black president with Barack Obama, that racism in our country was at least beginning to wane. But then came the election of 2016 and Donald J. Trump, who made it seem okay for the millions of Americans who harbored racist attitudes that had actually hardened during the Obama years to come out of the closet, so to speak. Trump, a world-class racist in his own right, made it okay to be racist again. Now the Republican Party is dealing with that. And many have chosen either to ignore the reality of racism within their own ranks or to pretend it doesn't even exist. Apparently, Senator Tim Scott, the only black Republican in the U.S. Senate, is in that last group. At least that's what he said on TV the other night. Take a listen to Steve Hammelman's piece from NotFakeNews.biz. It's called American Racism. Republican denial continues. Senator Tim Scott began his party's response to President Joe Biden's address to Congress on April 28 by calling the president a good man, whose speech was full of good words. While the first compliment could be applied in turn to the senator from South Carolina, his personal character seemed spotless. Not so the second compliment, especially in terms of Scott's reflections on race. In fact, his comments on this score were so contradictory and inaccurate as to compel us to ask, has the tendency to misrepresent the truth become so natural after 4 years of the Republican Party's obeisance to Donald Trump, whose lies numbered in the tens of thousands, that even the best of them don't know when they're mimicking him? To answer probably is as far as we can go toward giving Mr. Scott the benefit of a lingering doubt. These astonishing words came from Senator Scott's mouth. Hear me clearly. America is not a racist country. Well, this writer must firmly disagree. The American tragic flaw is and always has been not rampant materialism, not toxic unilateralism, not imperial ambition, and not political corruption. It is and always has been racism. In the annals of American history, journalism, and scholarship, institutional racism is a perennial theme. It cannot be gainsaid. It cannot be disputed. It cannot be denied. Except, it seems, by Republicans who successfully completed 4 years of training in the Donald Trump boot camp of willful ignorance and denial. What do you say to leaders who don't believe gun control would help to solve an epidemic of mass murder? Who believe environmental laws aren't necessary because man-induced climate change is a myth? Who believe 1% of the population has the right to own upwards of 50% of the wealth? Who don't support universal health care? Who believe that under Democratic leadership, the nation is on the fast track to Marxism? Who are convinced the 2020 election was stolen? It may be impossible to reason with Republicans. On the subject of race, however, we must try. Our democracy will be forever flawed until we get this thing right. As the number of police murders of black men and women prove beyond even the faintest shadow of a doubt, institutional racism exists. Individual racism requires a different analysis. Listen to black voices, parents, spouses, children, friends, co-workers, activists, lawyers, intellectuals, and preachers as they protest these murders and grieve the loss of loved ones in one televised case after another, How long must they invoke the names Floyd, Martin, Taylor, Bland, Wright, Brown, and Gray to bring about that change? Since this string of homicides isn't evidence for Senator Scott of widespread racism, he and his fellow senators can buckle down and do some reading, starting with The Great Land Robbery, Van R. Newkirk's study of how 1 million black families have been ripped from their farms. Or they can read 2 recent exposés of racism by Ta-Nehisi Coates, Fear of a Black President, and the equally disturbing The Case for Reparations. Or they can learn in a 2020 study at Civil Structural Engineer Media's nonpartisan website of irrefutable evidence that infrastructure has played an egregious role in inflaming racial division and inequality. Yes, racism was even designed into our interstate highway system. It goes without saying that the January 6th rioters, comprised of thousands of Trump idolaters, were motivated by a white supremacist agenda. Senator Scott might profit from reporter Luke Mogelson's account of the mayhem in the January 25th, 21 issue of The New Yorker, rich in detail, including the destruction of Black Lives Matter sign, the splinters of which the mob added to their arsenal. Racism was at the core of Trump's orders to, number 1, build a wall to keep out Mexicans branded as rapists. Number 2, to implement a travel ban against Muslims or terrorists. Number 3, and to demonize the Chinese, COVID-carrying communists. This latter group experiencing a surge of hate speech. In New York City, anti-Asian incidents spiked over 200% in 3 months. If such national and international news, which could be multiplied ad infinitum, we haven't even mentioned the wave of restrictive voting acts being passed in all red states, can't convince Scott and company of American racism, then his own words will do just as well. He admits to having been the target of discrimination. Liberals themselves, he says, aren't above such viciousness. Some of them have abused him with the N-word. Terrible. Any way you cut it. Yet, the senator is unaware that he undermines his own argument by exposing the wounds racism has inflicted upon him. Politicizing it, liberals are racist too, doesn't strengthen his case. In empty statements such as this one, he retreats further from the issue. And it's wrong to try to use our painful past to dishonestly shut down debates in the present. The best Senator Scott can muster at this point is this tired non sequitur. This is because speaking dishonestly is the default mode of all Trump-era Republican discourse, except for rare exceptions. Think Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney, Susan Collins. A rational person can't believe a word uttered by a member of the GOP. George Washington, the first American president, was elected in 1789. In other words, 232 years ago. Barack Obama, elected in 2008, 219 years later, was the first and only African American president of the United States out of 46. Kamala Harris is the first African American vice president of 49 in total. Tim Scott is the only African American Republican senator out of 50 and the first to represent a southern state since Reconstruction in 1865. In other words, 156 years ago. Senator Tim Scott is a moderate Republican who may mean well. If he's suggesting most Americans are not racist, we hardly agree. Nonetheless, Trumpism has rendered words like moderate inert. Tim Scott did not vote for impeachment. When a Republican senator decides to stand by Trump, who is racist, then his or her opinions about racism are without merit. That's what blind loyalty gets you. Guilt by association with a president who fomented a white supremacist assault on the Capitol. Many Democrats won't question the sincerity of Scott's optimism regarding the future of American race relations. Republicans would be foolish, however, to think that the curse of racism will be lifted without aggressive change wrought at all levels of government, starting with the level Scott has attained, the federal. Maybe Mr. Scott, whose primetime speech has resulted in talk of him running for president in 2024, can take the hint and try to turn his errant party around. By choosing him to rebut Biden, his colleagues fueled his prospects. We Democrats ask him to catch up with reality and then pass on what he finds to his denial-prone party. It's time for Republicans to start making sense again. For American democracy to survive, they need to begin today. That was a great piece by Steve Hammelman of notfakenews.biz. I really appreciate him sharing it with us. And I think he's right. We have a long way to go with respect to racism in this country. So, hey, we have to take a quick break here, but I'll be right back with some closing comments. So stay with us. Hey, thanks for listening to NFN Radio News. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and you'll come back on a regular basis. And it'd be great if you'd follow NFN Radio News so you don't miss an episode. Check out notfakenews.biz too, where you'll find new material just about every day by some excellent writers like Steve Hammelman, for example, with perspectives on a whole range of topics. You can sign up as a member at notfakenews.biz. And of course, it's all free. Also, let your friends know about this podcast and about notfakenews.biz. Our goal is to be informative and entertaining as we comment on the latest developments in the news with just a little lean to the left. We have some interesting guests lined up, so stay tuned and watch for that. This is Bob Gaddy signing off for NFN Radio News and NotFakeNews.